Hey everyone, we know how hard it can be to keep up with the latest news in Israel. So if you haven't had the time to stay on top of what's what in the Holy Land, we're here for you. I'm Ladar Gavelazi, and this is ILTV's Weekly Review.
Israel reacted with fury to the announced decision of French President Emmanuel Macron to recognize a Palestinian state in September. Other leading European nations chose not to follow Macron's lead, and U.S. President Donald Trump called the announcement irrelevant. More from ILTV's Devil Klein.
This was the announcement by French President Emmanuel Macron that caused anger in Jerusalem, Washington, and in the Jewish community in France. Consistent with its historic commitment to a just and lasting peace in the Middle East, I have decided that France will recognize the state of Palestine. Within a short time, Prime Minister Netanyahu fired back with this post. We strongly condemn President Macron's decision to recognize a Palestinian state next to Tel Aviv in the wake of the October 7th massacre. Such a move rewards terror and risks creating another Iranian proxy, just as Gaza became. A Palestinian state in these conditions would be a launchpad to annihilate Israel. And U.S. President Donald Trump said that he disapproved of Macron's move and that it was irrelevant.
Look, he's a different kind of a guy. He's okay. He's a team player, pretty much. But here's the good news. What he says doesn't matter. You know, it's not going to change it. Well, he made a statement, France, Macron. His statement doesn't carry any weight. He's a very good guy. I like him, but that statement doesn't carry weight.
A leader of the French Jewish community said that his president had made a grave moral mistake.
On est dans un contexte où le Hamas continue à vouloir tuer des Juifs, à vouloir tuer des Israéliens, où le Hamas continue à refuser toute reconnaissance de la présence et de l'État palestinien, de l'État israélien, et qui encore, dans sa déclaration, a dit finalement, il considère qu'Israël est un territoire occupé, c'est la libération de tous les territoires occupés. Donc en disant je vais reconnaître un État palestinien, moralement, on donne raison aux terroristes, on donne raison à ceux qui tuent les autres par haine.
Italy and the UK distanced themselves from the Macron move to recognize a Palestinian state before a ceasefire is achieved in Gaza.
The statehood that they need, that Palestine needs, and that Israel needs when it comes to its security. This can only be delivered by a diplomatic solution. We need the ceasefire. We are calling for a ceasefire. And then, of course, we will do everything we can from a position of a supporter for the region to get the circumstances where there's negotiations for the long-term statehood in Palestine and security for the region that they need.
As accusations of starvation in Gaza intensify, Israel launches new humanitarian operations and pushes back on claims that it's to blame. More on this from ILTV's executive editor, Mayan Hoffman.
The Israeli army says it's stepping up humanitarian aid to Gaza and pushing back against what it calls a false and dangerous narrative. In a statement Sunday morning, the IDF, under political directive and through COGAT, said it would be implementing daily localized tactical pauses from 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. in specific areas of Gaza where the military is not active. These pauses aim to facilitate humanitarian efforts and will continue until further notice. The decision was coordinated with the United Nations and international aid organizations. In addition, secure corridors have been designated from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. to allow the safe movement of UN and NGO convoys delivering food and medicine across the Strip. The announcement follows a move on Saturday night in which the IDF airdropped food into Gaza. 7 pallets of flour, sugar, and canned goods were dropped in coordination with international aid groups. The move comes as Israel faces growing international criticism over hunger in Gaza, and as graphic scenes of malnourished children in empty soup kitchens flood global headlines. But Israel insists it is not to blame. According to the army, over 250 aid trucks entered Gaza last week alone, and nearly 600 more were picked up by aid agencies from the Keren Shalom and Zikim crossings. Hundreds more are still waiting to be collected.
I want to emphasize that the state of Israel doesn't limit the trucks of aid coming to Gaza Strip. The main issue or the main problem is the collection and distributing issue. And we encourage our friends and our colleagues from the international community to do the collection and to distribute it.
Still, the crisis is reportedly worsening. Humanitarian agencies say conditions in Gaza remain catastrophic. The UN Children's Agency UNICEF warns that aid is not reaching those who need it. The IDF added that fighting against Hamas, above and below ground, will go on.
And joining us now with more on the latest developments in Gaza and the claims of famine and a humanitarian crisis is veteran Israeli journalist Ariel Kahana. Ariel, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Lidar. It's good to be with you again.
So we've seen massive international condemnation and pressure on Israel regarding the humanitarian situation in Gaza. Israel, of course, is denying these claims. So the first question I want to ask is there really a humanitarian crisis in Gaza?
So I guess there is at least a problem. You know, it's a war zone. I can tell you, Lida, I was last week myself in Gaza for about an hour. I joined the Israeli troops inside. I saw a lot of damage, a lot of fallen houses around me. I asked the soldiers, and they told me everything in every house we find it is either a bomb, either a gun, and so on. So it was used for terror, and Israel has no other choice than to destroy those places. And by the way, it's legal according to international law. I didn't see Arabs who lives in Gaza. I didn't see Gazans, so I can't tell you, according to my eyes, what's going on with the food there. But I guess it's hard. We see the pictures. To me, I'm sure that some of the pictures are fake. There is propaganda going out from Gaza. You know, it's not a free place, Gaza. Hamas in the places it's controlled very strongly, and people over there know what they are allowed to show outside and what they are not allowed to show outside. Now again, I'm sure there is kind of problem, but what I do know as well, and I'm just now coming out from a meeting that someone updated me once again, is that actually what happened is that it was the UN, the United Nations, and its agencies who stopped delivering the food. As you may know, the IDF showed that the content of 900 trucks was not taken by the UN agencies during the last week from the cross-border to the population centers in Gaza.
So Israel has said that it has let in an unprecedented amount of aid into the Strip. As you mentioned, the UN refuses to deliver much of this aid. Hamas is stealing much of it that we've seen. So what can or should be done? That's one question. And the other question is, the international pressure on Israel has been so intense that Prime Minister Netanyahu has agreed to temporary daily ceasefires to let in aid despite Israel having already let this aid in. Is this a massive hasbara or PR failure on Israel's part, that the world is simply not understanding the reality on the ground?
Well, unfortunately, it is, Lidar, because Israel, I would say, poorly explained what's really going on the ground in Gaza. The response was very little and very late. And I don't know why it is happening. I can tell you that in Hebrew, I more than once wrote about, as you said, the Hasbara problem. And actually, it's not Hasbara, it's just showing the truth, showing the facts. We are not doing it strongly enough. And from the other hand, what Hamas and the UN are doing is because they understand very well that the one who will spread the food, who will distribute the food in Gaza, will be the one who actually controls the population. That's why they are trying so hard to share that propaganda as if there is a problem in Gaza. If you go back to prior to October 2023, you will see that Hamas, way before the war, said there is hunger in Gaza. And not only Hamas, the UN also said there is a problem of food, actually hunger. They use the word hunger in Gaza. So I can tell you, or I'm sure, that just as before the war there was no hunger in Gaza, I'm sure there is no hunger now in Gaza. Again, maybe there is a problem. It's a war zone, but I'm sure there is no hunger. I'm sure all of that is Hamas and pro-Hamas propaganda. And I want to tell you once again that inside Gaza, the United Nations organizations and Hamas are heavily connected one to each other. I saw in Gaza, in my own eyes, in a previous visit, I saw that underground, we had the Hamas main servers control underground, and UNRWA on the ground, and the electricity was connected from UNRWA on the ground to Hamas servers underground, to Hamas computers underground. It was connected one to each other. And that's how Hamas generally, with the UN, are connected inside Gaza. So once they understood they may lose the control of spreading the food in Gaza, which means controlling the population, they began this campaign. And you're right, unfortunately, Israel, regarding the campaign, the propaganda campaign, the narrative campaign, unfortunately, Israel lost.
And now we heard President Trump say that Israel needs to decide what to do next. How do you interpret his statement, and what options are on the table for Benjamin Netanyahu now?
So, first of all, this evening, Monday evening, there's going to be another meeting of Netanyahu and his senior ministers to actually decide what are the coming steps for Israel to do. Because we have to recall, Lidar, that it's not only the humanitarian issue, it's also what's going on with the hostages. Because the negotiations in Qatar, as you know, actually failed last week. So Israel has now passed how to release the hostages. There is that humanitarian issue we discussed. And of course, there is a question, where is the war going to? So President Trump said he knows what he would have done. And I guess, as he said a few months ago, he said it's open hell over Gaza. I guess that's what Trump would do if he was the one to decide. But from Israelis' point of view, and especially from Prime Minister Netanyahu's point of view, all of that is much more complicated. So I can't tell you what Netanyahu is going to decide in the coming hours and days, because the issue, again, is very, very complicated, very sensitive. We have at least 20 alive hostages that we want to get them alive, and at least Netanyahu wants to do it by a deal. Hamas practically refuses to a deal. So how can we bring them back? It's a very painful question. I don't know what the answer is, but Israel is before very serious dilemmas, and the decisions will have to be made in the coming hours.
Absolutely, a lot of decisions to be made, and we, of course, will continue to follow. Ariel Kahana, thank you so much for your insights today.
Thank you very much.
It's day 663 of the war in Gaza, and finally, the entire Arab League is condemning the October 7th massacre and demanding that Hamas disarm. The Arab call has yet to be accepted by Hamas. Meanwhile, the war is ongoing. More on this from ILTV's Steve Leibowitz.
It took them way too long, but in a first, the Arab League condemned Hamas and the October 7th massacre and called for the terrorists to disarm. The call came in a declaration released at the United Nations confab for a two-state solution. The declaration is signed by the EU and many other countries. It urges the terror group to give up Gaza rule, free the hostages, and at the same time calls on Israel to end the war in Gaza and agree to a Palestinian state. Arab and Muslim countries signing the declaration included Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and Turkey. The still unpublished 17-page text called the New York Declaration reportedly sets out a phased plan to end the conflict in Gaza, Judea and Samaria, and the entire Middle East region. Meanwhile, it's day 663 of the war in Gaza. Hamas has not put down their arms, and with no ceasefire in sight, the IDF is pushing forward with attacks on Hamas in a number of areas of Gaza, both above and below ground. IDF forces destroyed a weapons storage facility in the southern sector. Secondary explosions were identified, indicating presence of ammunition. In the Khan Yunis area, Division 36 eliminated a number of terrorists over the past 24 hours and directed airstrikes on terror targets. In one of the strikes, a weapons storage facility was destroyed. In Zaytun, the 98th Division continues to expand combat operations in the northern sector in the areas of Sujaiya and Zaytun. The forces are working to destroy terror infrastructure and disrupt enemy firing and launching capabilities. The Arab call to disarm has so far gone unheeded by Hamas. In the meantime, the IDF continues to degrade any and all Hamas assets found in Gaza.
Now, while the prospect of a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict may look dim in most places given the current situation, it's still on the agenda at the United Nations, which is holding a conference this week promoting the idea. More in this report. As the war in Gaza rages on, ministers from dozens of nations gathered at the United Nations Monday to begin a conference promoting the creation of a Palestinian state as the solution to the Israel-Arab conflict. The meeting is hosted by Saudi Arabia and France just days after French President Emmanuel Macron announced his country would grant official recognition to a Palestinian state in September. Diplomats at the conference say its purpose goes beyond the Gaza war, aiming to keep alive the idea of a two-state solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and to speak out against actions that could prevent that from happening.
Elle donne raison à ceux qui, en Palestine comme en Israël, sont des acteurs de paix, ont toujours rejeté le terrorisme et ont toujours rejeté la violence. Elle donne tort au Hamas, qui a toujours combattu la solution à deux États et ne reconnaît pas le droit d'Israël à exister. En retour de cette décision capitale de la France, des engagements historiques seront pris, seront cristallisés aujourd'hui et demain à New York. Cette conférence est donc une étape décisive. Une étape décisive sur le chemin qui mène, bien sûr, jusqu'à l'émergence de cette solution à deux États, qui mène jusqu'à l'Assemblée générale des Nations unies au mois de septembre, au cours de laquelle la France formalisera, par la voix du président de la République, sa décision de reconnaissance et où nous comptons sur la mobilisation collective qui devra se poursuivre avant qu'il ne soit trop tard.
At the conference, Saudi Arabia's foreign minister reiterated that his country would only establish relations with Israel in the context of advancement towards a two-state solution. But both Israel and the U.S. are boycotting the UN conference. State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce said in a statement, the United States will not participate in the July UN two-state solution conference. This is an ill-advised stunt that will further embolden Hamas and undermine our serious diplomatic efforts to end the war. We will continue to work with partners towards a resolution. And for a developing story out of the U.S., let's go now to our ILTV correspondent, Libby Alon, who is standing by with more details on the shooting that occurred last night in New York City, where an attacker killed 4 people before taking his own life. Libby, some people are speculating that the shooter screamed, "Free Palestine." Can you shed some light on the situation?
Yes, Kalev, good evening. A deadly evening in Midtown Manhattan where 4 people, including a police officer, were killed in a shooting. The shooter, Shane Tamora, began a pre-planned killing spree. On July 26, he left Las Vegas, drove across the country, and arrived in New York yesterday. At around 6:30 p.m., reports came in about an active shooter at Park Avenue and 52nd Streets. Security cameras captured Tamora getting out of BMW holding an M4 assault rifle. He entered the lobby of the building, which houses the NFL's main offices, and opened fire on a police officer, killing Officer Didrol Islam. He then shot on a woman who was hiding and a security guard under a desk and another man in the lobby. He went up to the 33rd floor, fired several more shots, killing another person, and then turned the gun on himself. Tamora had a documented history of mental health issues. He was a former football player with no criminal record. A suicide note found in his pocket claimed he was suffering from CTE, a brain condition linked to the head injuries common among football players. According to witnesses, this doesn't appear to be a terror attack or related somehow to Israel or Gaza. It seems Tamora was a frustrated football ex-player, angry at how the NFL treats brain-injured athletes. Police are still investigating, and we will keep you updated from here.
Libby Alon, thank you for that.
Millions of Israelis were once again forced to shelter as the Houthi rebels fired yet another ballistic missile at central Israel. The single projectile was intercepted by air defenses. There were no reports of impact or injuries. Sirens sounded across central Israel and the Jerusalem area. Since March 18th, when the IDF resumed its offensive against Hamas in Gaza, the Houthis have launched 66 ballistic missiles and at least 17 drones at Israel. Most of the threats were shot down by air defense. Recent missile attacks failed to cause major damage.
Israeli tourists were once again confronted with demonstrators trying to prevent their arrival in Greece. The latest incident was in the island of Rhodes, as the protesters attempted to prevent Israeli tourists arriving from Israel on a cruise ship and trying to disembark. The incidents are taking place at the height of the summer tourist season, when the Greek islands are among the most popular destinations. Pro-Palestinian protesters scuffled with police at the Rhodes Old City port. Some of the protesters were reportedly arrested. Last week, a similar protest took place on the Greek island of Syros. At that time, the passengers were instructed not to disembark for their own safety. This time, after a short delay, the Israeli tourists were able to leave the cruise ship and visit Rhodes.
I'm sure the government of Greece can take care of us. We see all the police here. I feel safe. I'm not scared. I'm proud to be Israel. I'm proud to come here, and I love it.
Now, as Yemen's Houthi rebels continue firing rockets toward Israel and carry out attacks on Israeli-bound shipping in the Red Sea, they are now also actively training for the invasion of Israel. The planned attack has been dubbed Al-Aqsa Flood, the same name used by Hamas for its October 7th cross-border massacre. Steve Leibowitz has more.
Sure, a Houthi rebel ground incursion seems far-fetched, but who would have believed that the Houthis could still be firing missiles at Israel after 21 months, even after absorbing repeated punishment from the Air Force, devastating Houthi assets in Yemen. And now the rebels are reportedly preparing an invasion of Israel. The Houthis are training for the invasion dubbed Al-Aqsa Flood in a secret location in Yemen, 2,000 kilometers from the Israeli borders. According to Israel Hayom newspaper, Israel is monitoring the threat. The article includes this YouTube video showing the Houthis training on obstacle courses and at shooting ranges. Targets include the flags of Israel, the United States, and the United Kingdom. Israel has repeatedly retaliated against the Houthis with damaging airstrikes 2,000 miles away. Since the start of the war, the Air Force targeted Houthi infrastructure, including facilities at 3 ports, the airport in Sana'a, and a power plant. Undeterred, this week the Houthis announced an escalation of their campaign against commercial ships in the Red Sea, saying that any vessel owned by companies doing business with Israeli ports could be targeted. The war front with the Houthis remains active. The Yemeni rebels continue firing missiles toward Israel several times weekly. They continue to target Israeli-bound shipping, and now they are preparing an infiltration. Israel is aware of the threats and takes action when called for.
For more of the latest updates from Israel, make sure to subscribe to our newsletter at iltv.tv or download the ILTV Plus app. That's it for ILTV's weekly review. See you next week.